All right, welcome to video 2. Now that we've covered the research plan, we'll get back into secondary sources and we'll practice finding different secondary sources and we'll locate relevant information within those secondary sources. So let's get a start. Step 2 of the research process. So last week we stopped at using Witkin and Calger. So we know how to get to those legal encyclopedias and what to do when we get there. But what about all these other secondary sources? After you've learned some basics in a legal encyclopedia, you might turn next to a treatise or to a practice guide. So Module 1 had this handy chart in Brightspace to help you figure out which secondary source type you might want to use. But I like to keep 4 questions in mind. First is the threshold question. What is my jurisdiction? Next is what area of law is involved. And so this will get me together to a jurisdiction-specific, subject-specific source. So let's think about that for a second. Calger is jurisdiction-specific. It's California jurisprudence, but it's not subject-specific because as a legal encyclopedia, it necessarily covers many, many subjects. So it's not specific to just one subject, like a treatise on contracts or on bankruptcy might be. So the next question I like to ask is, what's the depth that you need? Are you still at the floaties stage, which I like to think of as the Calger or the Witkin, the legal encyclopedia stage? Or are you now at this middle stage, which is more for treatises? And then finally, the last question is where your research plan 3-ish comes into it, where you're thinking about your starting points, your existing knowledge, the depth of the answer. That's how much you need to know when you're looking for this secondary source. So ask yourself these questions, and if you still don't know a good title to begin with, here are 3 solutions for you. Number 1, ask an expert. That can look like a librarian, that can look like the assigning attorney, that can look like a colleague in the office next to you, that can look like someone on an email listserv that you belong to. So ask an expert, what secondary source should I go to when I'm starting research on this topic? Solution number 2, consult a research guide. I teased this in the first module, but we'll cover it a little bit more in depth right now. And then the third solution is to browse. Just dive into that large database and start browsing it. So let's stop for a second on number 2, consulting a research guide. So this guide, the Secondary Sources Guide, is curated just for LLS, just for Loyola Law School. It lists the titles of secondary sources that we have available to us. So you can't search within those sources here at the guide. It's just a list of titles, but all the titles that are listed in this guide are linked to, or you're provided with the call number so that you can go find it in the library stacks. So if we want titles of secondary sources about civil procedure, we can visit the guide, click on civil procedure, and then we'll see a list of titles of secondary sources. So here we are in the civil procedure tab. So on the left, we've got federal CivPro sources, and on the right, we have California CivPro sources. And no matter which of these topics you pick, if you click into bankruptcy, not bankruptcy, but if you click into a lot of these topics, you'll then find these 2 categories of federal and California. So this is jurisdiction specific, right? And it's topic specific. And there's lots of options here in the CivPro tab. So notice these icons. The red circle is for Lexis, and the orange is for Westlaw, and the blue is for CEB. And if there's a little book icon, that means it's available in the library. So say that I ask you to provide me with a title of a jurisdiction specific, topic specific, secondary source on civil procedure, and I want it to be available on Lexis. Could you start here in this LibGuide and provide me with a title? Absolutely. Here we've got Matthew Bender. So it's on federal pretrial civil procedure, and it's in California even though it's in the federal column. It doesn't mean that it's California Civ Pro, but it just indicates that it's probably going to cover the Ninth Circuit because that's the federal circuit that covers California. Okay, now if I ask you to provide me with a title of a jurisdiction-specific, topic-specific secondary source on Civ Pro and Lexis, could you instead go straight to Lexis and search in there for one? Of course. And there are how do I's in Module 1 that talk you through how to do that. So they've got a range of steps for locating secondary sources by jurisdiction or by topic, among others. So go back and revisit those how do I's if you need to dive straight into Lexis to look for your secondary sources. Okay, so head back to your learning exercise. You're now ready to work on part 2, questions 2 and 3. So return here for the next video once you reach that stop portion.